Ngak Rinpoche, Aro Yeshi, Yangsi.
Tachi Dele, Khandro Déchen.
Drala Jong is the place, well, when I first met Dudra Rinpoche in 1971, he always said that I should get a place, a center in the end. It seemed quite impossible for a long time to have a center, so we always hired places, but then Konzang Dudra Rinpoche said to me, you must get a center. And so we put a lot of effort into it, and here it is. I asked him for a name, and he said that I should devise my own name. He said he'd check it, and so I came up with Drala Jong, because the countryside is very important for us, and the whole idea of Drala, of the life of existence, the life of the whole of existence, is important. And so having this natural situation here is really quite good for that, for just sitting in the woods with the trees and being aware of it as a living situation, which is particularly important now where there's a big drive to plant trees and to change the climate and the whole variety of things. So we've put a lot of energy. I think we've planted over 2,000 trees now here. And so Drala Jong, I told, I went to Konzang Dudra Rinpoche, he said, yes, you have a name? I said, yes, Drala Jong. He said, this is perfect. And so it went from there. So we now have this place that needs a lot of work. I mean, it's nice enough at the moment. We can have small gatherings of our own students here at the moment, but it's not open to the public yet because we've not had the change of use permission. Once we get that and the building permission, then we'll build a proper shrine room here with shrine cabinets and everything.
Yes, we currently have 23 acres in total in terms of the land, and we have the buildings, the shrine room, the farmhouse, and some other outbuildings that we would like to convert into more sleeping accommodation for larger retreats. And of the 23 acres, we have 6 acres of pasture, and the rest is woodland, which we're managing in the sense of a light sort of management. It's not that we want to change it drastically because it already has an incredible biodiversity, but we just want to encourage more. We have a pond here where we've been working to repair it actually because it has a leak. And something small like that, having a pond, will make an enormous difference to the diversity of wildlife here. So those are the sort of things we've been doing until now.
The pond actually has a little island in it, and we're going to build a little lakang there on the island because we were given a wooden model of the Lukang in Lhasa, the secret temple of the 6th Dalai Lama. So we have a model of this that's about this large, made in wood. It was donated to us, and we suddenly thought, oh, this is a good place for it on this island because the Lukang is full of paintings of Ngakpas, all engaged in tulko and in all sorts of exercises connected with Togal. And so it's really very close to our lineage, that kind of imagery. I did have childhood visions. I didn't know they were visions. They were just experiences of a young child, and it wasn't really till I met Dudra Rinpoche that he recognized what they were. I didn't even tell them to him, but I first met him in 1971. I'd gone to the Himalayas because I'd become interested in Tibetan Buddhism when I was about 8 or 9 years old through finding books in the school library They were books by two Czechoslovakian authors. I can't pronounce their names, but one was called Tibetan Art, the other one was called On the Road Through Tibet. They were there, and I was just hypnotized completely by these books. I then later saw various pictures. I started collecting books on Tibet by travelers and by academics like Giuseppe Tucci, Helmut Hoffmann, and these people. And I saw in them pictures of Ngakpas. And again, these pictures of Ngakpas seemed very important to me. So I went out into the Himalayas at the age of 19 in order to meet Ngakpas. I had no idea of becoming one. I had no idea that a thing like that was possible, so that wasn't in my mind. The first Lama I met was Ngakpa Yeshidorji. He was in McLeodganj, and he invited me to come to a Trumanakmo Druptab that he was performing there. And he could speak no English, and I could only speak a few words of Tibetan at that time. But it's wonderful how you can communicate if you really want to. So he was saying something and saying, "Come up, I'm uphill there," or pointing. He was just speaking Tibetan, and so he said some word, and I said, "Sangi, tomorrow." He said, "No." Then I thought, "Sangin, tomorrow." He said, "Yeah." So it was my way of getting to the day after next. So it was a lot of it was like that at the first. And so I found a translator who could help me, who'd always go there. His name was Sonam, and he was at the medical school there, and he often translated for me. So Ngakpa Yeshe Dorji's wife was Khandro Tenzin Dolka, and we became very good friends. And she died recently, and we've been friends with her all our life. She was really quite an important yogini. She went into Tugdam for 9 days at the end of her life. So we miss her, but they sent me off to Nepal. They said, if you want to practice this Tramanakmo, then you should go directly to Dudjom Rinpoche and ask him to be your teacher. So I went there. He was in Boda, and I asked where he lived. I was told where he lived. I knocked on the door and said, I would like to meet Dudjom Rinpoche. I've been sent here by Ngakpa Yeshe Dorji. And he said, "Oh, come in." And at that time, it was so easy to meet him. The next thing, I was in the room, and he was asking me who I was. And in that very first session with him, he said, "I am Khandro over your head seeing. This is your mother." And I didn't really know what was going on. And then he told me I was the incarnation of Aro Yeshe, who was the son of Kyungchen Arulingma. So I really found it all out from him. So whatever I had of visions and dreams when I was young, they didn't make any sense to me until he explained. And then it all fitted into place, what that was. Then the next thing that happened, of course, well, after he asked me to come to see him every day, and I did, and he'd spend a few hours with me every day. And then, rather than send me away when other people came to see him, he said, if you like, you could just sit there. So that's what I did. I just sat there all day long and listened to him speaking in Tibetan to various people, and in between he'd say a few things to me, then someone else would come in, and it went on in that way. And eventually he said to me, "I would like to ask you to do something, but only if you really want to." And that is to establish the tradition of Ngakpas in the West, because it is not in a good situation here, and it's in danger of dying out, and I would like to establish it. Would you do that? And I said, yes, certainly, anything. And so he gave me ordination as a Ngakpa then, and he said it will be difficult, and people will hate you. You will have many difficulties if you try to do this, so you can say no, because there will be difficulties. And there certainly have been, but as no one's killed me, it's all right. we've had all sorts of difficulties, and people have said all kinds of crazy things. The first thing that people said was Ngakpa Chogyam's invention, they don't exist. This was Western academics. Then they found out that they did exist, and they said, well, all right, they exist, but they have to be monks first and become Ngakpas later. This is nonsense, of course. And then they found out, no, they don't, because there's Repcon, people are brought up as Ngakpas there. And they said, but the only people who dress like this are Tibetans. It's not ordinary people who dress like this. And then they found that that was wrong. Then the next thing they found was wrong was they said there were no Ngakmas, there were only male. And then, of course, there was research in Amdo, and 500 Ngakmas were found there, and so that ended. But the funny thing is that none of them ever apologized for this. They were just proved to be wrong, and that was it. So now, one of the best things, really, is that there are now people asking their teachers for Ngakpa ordination who've never heard of me. And that makes me very happy, because not because I'm humble or something, but because it means, because they don't know about me, it's got a life of its own. It's actually going on there in the world with no connection with me at all, or with Khandro Déchen. Even though we worked for it for years, it's now on its own. So the fact that we're not known about by a lot of people is really very good, because it's a situation that will continue. Mm.
Really only have a small Sangha in total of about 200 individuals, and that's who are particularly in this particular Ngakpa tradition, and those people are distributed in Europe, here in the British Isles, in Scandinavia, in America. So it's our particular tradition is not large, but the practices really work ideally in a situation where you can have personal contact with your Lama, which you can't have in a huge Sangha. So that's it's not something we're seeking to make large, because in order to make the most of the practices, you need the personal guidance of a Lama.
Mm. I think although there aren't that many, the ones who are here, I would guess are more committed than some of those in far larger Sanghas. So we have very few people who are floating. Almost all of them are committed practitioners, and so although they're low in number, they're quite high in commitment, and that makes quite a difference, particularly in terms of the arts. We have quite a high percentage of artistic people. So we have tanka painters, we have people involved in silversmithing, we have people in what's it called, three-dimensional
printing.
Yeah, three-dimensional printing. We have leather workers. We have applique We have an applique artist in Switzerland who's learnt Tibetan applique, has created some really wonderful appliques. So this is one of our specialities, and people people who see these things always imagine that we have a far larger Sangha than we have because of the artwork that's produced. So we're quite involved with that. We're aware that, when you look at a Tibetan Gompa or Bhutanese Gompa and you see what's inside, it's always, fantastic, but people have to realize that it maybe took 1,000 years for it to look like this with everything that's inside it. So we're aware that we don't have 1,000 years here. We have about 20 or 30 years, and so we're trying to build something up for the future, and we're actually quite pleased with what's happened and what's been produced. So that's been important. So we have a really high emphasis on the arts and crafts as being practiced, not simply craft work. As often thought, there are the practitioners and there are the craftspeople and artists who aren't really practitioners. We don't really work in that way. So the arts and crafts are all considered as practice. Well, we want, first of all, the first priority is to have a proper shrine room, which this is not a proper shrine room at the moment. This is a room that's painted in shrine room colours that has many things on shelves, almost like a shop in Boda. But eventually there'll be proper shrine cabinets, and it'll all be laid out in a sensible way that is educational. So there'll be the shrine room. We've got, with the other places, barns to convert into accommodation. We've also potentially got the involvement of the Gorkhas in Aldershot, who want a place to use. They got in contact with us. We went to have lunch with them, and that was really nice. And they have an interest in building accommodation here. So nothing's been settled yet. They have yet to come and visit. And that's really waiting on the change of use application and the building application. But when that comes through, they'll come and visit, and then we'll get the legal people in with our charities to work something out for what they build here. So they'll come and use it. And amazingly, I knew the Sherpas were Buddhist, but I didn't know the Gorkhas were also Buddhist. But the British Army Gorkha Regiment contains Gorkhas, Sherpas, Gurungs and Tamangs, or all those different groups who originally came from Tibet and settled in northern Nepal, and they're all Nyingma practically, particularly the ones in Aldershot. Their main teacher is Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who was one of my teachers, and so we have a really good contact there. So we did ask them, why don't you get your own place? And they said, well, we don't want to do that because we don't want our children to think this is just a Nepalese thing. So we want to see that there are Western people doing this. And of course, we have the other point of view that we're very happy, to have real ethnic Buddhists here, participating in this. And so that's all very nice. The other part of it is, to invite Nyingma Lamas here, particularly from the Gurkha Changlode, the Ngakpas and Ngakmas. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche has promised to come. Dudra Rinpoche Tenzin Yeshidoji has promised to come. And various other lamas have already been here, like Kyabje Latse Tulku Rinpoche has come with his family. And so we've already had some visits from lamas here, and we want to encourage that and make it a place of Nyingma activity in Britain. Because I think we are, I'm not sure, but I think we may be the only Nyingma residential centre in Britain. I think Namkhai Nobo Rinpoche has a place, but he's of a slightly different lineage. So we're connected with gTér, which is why we have the whole Tersai here, and we're going to get the termas of Lingpa as well as texts, so that any Lamas who come here will have texts. We'd like to help re-establish the gTér in Britain. That's an important thing for us, because Rinpoche was my first teacher, and the Teer suffered a setback at the end of the 70s in this country when his centre was appropriated by someone else, and then he stopped coming here. And so we'd like to help re-establish the Teer in Britain by whatever way we can, by having Teer Lamas be able to give retreats here and courses, and find students here who are interested in Teer. So it has many aspects, but generally anything we can do to help with the Teer and with the Gurkha Changlode in general.
And when we become open to the public, we obviously want to develop our more links with the local community. So at the moment, because we're not open, people don't really know very much about what we're doing here. And we have all this beautiful land, and as well as developing it in terms of its biodiversity, we want to develop a place where people can come. There's a lot of mental health issues at the moment, where people could come, maybe work, maybe spend time. We want to develop the vegetable garden so that we become more self-sufficient in terms of growing our own food. We also have a plan to develop a garden based along the astrological element principles, growing medicinal herbs and things like that. So it's almost like the vision is is infinite. We could go so far the more time we have.
Of course, this place is already a repository of quite a few ancient things. They're not all on show. For example, there'll be a purkang, which will contain the lineage purbas, and we've got some really wonderful ancient purbas here, some which were given to me by Dudjom Rinpoche, that go back to Dudjom Rinpoche. There was a set of 1,000 purbas that were made by Dorje Legpa, and he gave me some of these, so these are here. We have the helmet of General Shengpa, which would be part of the Lingesa shrine. General Shengpa was one of the previous incarnations of Kunzang Dorje Rinpoche. So I think I showed that to you yesterday. It's the one over there. And so the Lingesa shrine will have a saddle with Tibetan saddle carpets, and above it will be the helmet of General Shengpa, and then there'll be pictures of various lamas around the tanka, the applique tanka of Lingesa that's over there, and there'll be various photographs around that of the lamas we've known who are connected with Lingesa, like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. We have a nice picture of him on his horse that will be there. So the shrine room will be something like a series of installations. So there'll be the lakang in the corner there, then there'll be the gunkang, the churkang, the purkang, and so there'll be all these different installations of yidams and protectors. And over here we've been able to start making some of the lineage statues. So this Mazadosum here are particular to the gTér. They're fairly similar to the standard ones, but there are certain differences, such as Ekajati holds a Katvanga. That doesn't usually happen. She's also a two-breasted form of Ekajati rather than single, so that's a difference. And there are differences with the Doje Legpa. The Zarahula is more or less the same as the general one, but this is the specific set for the gTér. And in front of Ekajati is a statue of Damjen Ngorjin Baramezea, who is the protector of Drala Jong, and up there there's a tanka of him, which we had painted by
top Lingtam in the Netherlands.
Yeah, Tapen Lingsang.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he lives in Belgium, is it?
Oh, maybe
Belgium. Yeah, he's a very fine tanka painter.
Mm-hmm.
So he's painted a few tankas for us now. We have our own tanka painters, but they're all extremely busy. So if we want anything extra, then we go to him for it. So there's all kinds of work that has to be done in here. First of all, the kitchen has to be taken out, that's at the back, and has to be moved higher up where Metsa and Jagyo live. And so they have a proper kitchen dining room, and then the kitchen will move out of here, and this will be expanded. Then we're going to expand the shrine room about 15 foot back that way, and have an entrance hall built onto it for people to hang their coats. We've got a rough kitchen over there. It's all very rough. We have, in the dining hall at present, it's just a barn, and we have a tent inside it, a large tent, because things tend to fall from the ceilings in terms of dust and cobwebs and whatever, because it's still undeveloped. So there's that to develop, as well as other accommodation here. So that's all part of the future, and hopefully it'll all work with the Gorkhas, and they won't change their minds. I don't think they will, but it's not settled yet. The Aroga in southern Tibet was somewhere on the borders of Bhutan in Tibet, very far south. And at the time of the Chinese invasion, Nyingma predicted that they should move to Bhutan. And so Aroyeshe and Jomo Ashi Khandro with some attendants went to Bhutan to look at the country, and travelled around a little. That's all I know. And when we went to Bhutan some years ago, I think it was 2019, our guide then, Sonam Gyaltsen, saw the picture of Aroyeshe, which is on the cover of the text here. I'm not sure where it is at the moment.
It's in the dining room.
Yeah. He saw that, he said, I've seen a picture like this on someone's shrine in Batsam. And we said, well, if you could find where it is, we'd really like to know, but he's not been able to find it. So it is possible that some did go to Bhutan, but we've never had any contact at all. We've never been able to find anyone, so we really don't know. They would all be very old now, or mainly dead. There'd only be the children of those people left, so whether anything continued or not, I don't know. Kunzang Dorje Rinpoche and Jomo Sampel recognized Khandro Déchen as the incarnation of Aye Khandro. So that's jolly nice. It would be jolly nice even if she wasn't, but so that's there's been no trace of Aye Khandro, because Aroyeshe had two sangyums, but they were sisters, which is not uncommon in Tibet for that to happen, for a man to marry sisters or a woman to marry brothers. Not common, but not unknown. So but there's been no trace of her. So we try to continue this tradition and attempt to benefit people by providing a form of practice that can be integrated with everyday life, with working family life. So that's our emphasis. We don't have the practice of long retreats. We have a system of people having retreat all the time in their lives, for a day, a weekend, sometimes a week or longer, but that it's ongoing, it never stops, and that people see their everyday lives as practice. So that's what we emphasize, rather than long retreat and living separately from normal life. Because we have a feeling that that's more likely to be the future in the West. We're not really sure how much monasticism can work in the West. We have no problem with it as such, but we're not sure whether it has a long life here. We'll have to see. I've certainly had teachers who were monastic, and I have very wonderful memories of them, but as you see, it's not what we're involved with.
Yeah.
One particular area of teaching that we have is the when Rinpoche was talking about integrating your whole life into practice, it's integrating your relationship with your partner into practice in a very specific way. I won't go into a synopsis of the teaching here because it's very complicated, but it's an area of practice such that you should end up with a very good, respectful, trusting, romantic relationship that goes on into the future, and it should be the ideal atmosphere in which to bring up children.
Yeah, it's from a teaching of Nyingma called the Khandro Déchen Melongu. So it's the mirror that shows the sun and moon of the Khandros and Pawos. This is not totally unusual. It's within every tantra. You find this, that men are externally compassion, internally wisdom. Women are externally wisdom, internally compassion. That's the basis of it, but it becomes far more elaborate than that in terms of gaining realization through romance, looking at that aspect of the nyam, of Khandro power reflection, so that we don't deny that men and women are attracted to each other through neurosis, as many psychologists will say, that two equally damaged people are attracted to each other. Yes, that is also there, but what is underneath that is the reflection. So both happen at the same time. It's the wisdom and method that are being reflected as well as the neurosis, and this particular teaching places the emphasis on the mirroring of wisdom and method rather than the other neurotic aspects. And of course, if you have a happy marriage, you're going to have happy children. If you have a bad marriage, it's not going to be good for the children. And to have a peaceful world, you really need psychologically balanced human beings, and they can only come out of happy families. They can't come out of miserable families. So that we see as being very important for the peace of the planet in the future. Yeah.
The reason I decided to start learning Tibetan was entirely accidental, because we were having a conversation one day, weren't we, years ago, when you said that your only regret was that you had never studied Tibetan informally, because undoubtedly you have studied Tibetan and know an awful lot, but have not become a translator, have not done intensive study in the Tibetan language. So I thought, oh well, all right then. As you, if that's your regret, then I'll have a go. And so I think that's why I made the decision to make learning Tibetan part of my everyday life. But I don't have much time. I mean, we studied. I've been studying with you now for five years roughly, and actually, you know, when you're learning a language, you have no idea how much you know, really. Sometimes you get little insights and think, oh, well, I do know that, and that, I didn't realise I knew that.
Yeah.
But I find it incredibly useful in bringing the practice to life, knowing the meaning of the real meaning of words. The translation, it gives you such a depth. I'm not saying my understanding's deep at all, but I have the sense that it can give you such a depth of understanding if you know and can translate Tibetan. And
we always encourage people to learn Tibetan, because one of the things I always say is that of all languages, Tibetan is the only language where it doesn't matter how much you learn. Even if you learn a little bit, it's useful. If you're a Buddhist practitioner, that is. And that, so, you know, with French or German or whatever, you failed unless you can go to that country and speak to people. But if you start learning Tibetan, even if you can never do that, even if you just learn the syllabary and can learn to say, oh, I mean, we've had students in Bodha who'll go into a gompa and they'll be so excited to say, oh, Omahong Banzaguru Pamasirihong, and they can read it. You know, this is such a thing that puts you in contact. You know, you're not on the outside because you can read it. And you know, someone could just learn a little and it would benefit them. I mean, you can't do that with other languages. Or maybe if you're a Catholic, you can do it with Latin, perhaps. You know, it's like that. This is the religion, the language of the religion. But, so it's extremely useful. And I just decided to spend my time in retreat rather than learning Tibetan. So I had to do one or the other. So I spent the time in retreat. But all the Tibetan I've learned has come from copying texts for Chimi Rigson Rinpoche, because his texts had been eaten through by silverfish, these insects that eat paper. And so I must have copied thousands of sheets for him of text because he likes my handwriting. So I learned so much from doing that I've absorbed, you know, Tibetan spelling. Like I seem to be able to, you know, guess what the prefixes are, or what the superjoined or subjoined letters might be. If I don't know a word, I can often guess what they are. And that's, of course, extremely useful if you're looking at someone else's translation, because we have, sometimes we pay people to translate for us. Then I look at their translation, and often I don't like the English. But the only way I can change the English is by looking back at the Tibetan text and saying, what is that word? And I look it up and I think, no, I'm not going to use that English word. I will use another English word that's better there. And so I improved the translation. Well, I think I improve it, but other people might think not. But that's only possible, you know, because I recognize the script and I can say, what this word means, and then in the dictionary it'll often give you maybe a dozen alternatives for how this word can be. You know, it doesn't have to be this word. And there's a tendency for translators to translate in a way that makes it sound pietistic. sacerdotal, sort of heavy and not exciting. And for me, Vajrayana has always been exciting rather than moralistic. You know, it's been something that changes your life, that is full of meaning. And so when I adjust the translations, I try to bring that out in it. So that's been possible without being able to speak it even, just recognizing the words. And of course, when I was in Nepal with Dudra Rinpoche, because I knew the technical language of Vajrayana, I could ask anyone to translate. They'd say, oh, I can't translate, I don't know Dharma. And I'd say, it doesn't matter. Just translate and leave all the Dharma words in Tibetan. And they did that, and it was quite easy, you know, so they could translate because they didn't have to change them into English. So I found that extremely useful. So we encourage people with learning Tibetan, even if they only know a very little, it's helpful, and they don't feel on the outside of the thing, you know, divided by the language. And if you start, you don't have to stop, you know.
And the good thing about learning a language is that it challenges you. It puts you on the spot. You know, if you expect me to say something, and I think, oh, I have to reach for the words, and sometimes they come, sometimes they don't come. But it's just part of life. You have to be stretched and challenged. And it's a lot of fun.
Our emphasis on people understanding the yanas. We find that there is a lot of misunderstanding comes from the fact that people don't understand the difference between the yanas, the vehicles, tekpa. That people are confused by what different lamas teach because they contradict each other. And so we try to educate people into the yanas so that they understand why there's a contradiction, and that the contradiction doesn't mean this right and wrong, it just means this is sutra, this is tantra, this is dzogchen, or this is sutra, outer tantra. You know, there's renunciation, purification, transformation, self-liberation. And if you give an explanation from one, it's going to be very different from the others. And to understand that each yana has a base, a path, and a result, and that it depends on the base what the path looks like. And I think that for a lot of people in the West, brought up in a Judeo-Christian society, they think of religion as truth. And are always shocked when I say Buddhism is not a religion of truth, it's a religion of method. The method leads to the truth, but the religion is method, it's not truth. Which is why, because it's not truth, it can be different. Truth is only one truth, but method is infinite. So there are these different yanas, and they all have a different principle. And so for us it's very important to teach that, because not only is that important in Buddhism, it's important for being tolerant to other religions by understanding them. I mean, I don't have to understand Christianity to have an understanding of principles. I had a lady friend once, and we were going to Sami Ling, and we stopped with her aunts and uncles, who were all spinster and bachelor, living together in a house. They were school teachers, and they were talking about a case of stigmata. You know stigmata? There was apparently a nun who was bleeding from the hands, and they said, this is impossible. Christ was crucified through the wrists, not through the hands, because the nail would tear out through the hands. It had to go through the wrist, and so that can't be real. And so I said to them, wouldn't it have been where the nun thought they were? That was her vision. If she thought they were there, she'd bleed from there, wouldn't she? And they thought, oh, I never thought of it like that. So this is very funny. I'm convincing Catholics of their own faith here on Buddhist principles. You know, that pure vision is what it is. So understanding the principle is very important for being tolerant of other religions, understanding what the principle might be there and how it's beneficial for somebody. So the principle is always beneficial. If you understand the base and the principle, then you understand the nature of the religion. And you can apply that not only to other religions, but to philosophies, to political philosophies as well. You can say, what's the base, the path, and the fruit here? Even though it's not a yana, you can analyze it like that, and then you can say, oh, this is how it's useful for people. And then that breeds tolerance between people and is beneficial. I think that's the last I have to say without becoming complicated in some way. This was the photograph. It was sent to me. It was found in Thimphu. And it's obviously been hand-coloured by somebody. But someone took a slide of it and posted it to me. It was there. And so they sent it to me because Aroyeshi was an albino, which is quite unusual in Tibet. Well, it's unusual in the West too, but so we showed it to Khonzang Dorje Rinpoche, and he identified it as Aroyeshi. He performed a mo, and he said, "No, this is definitely Aroyeshi." So this is what he looked like, and this is the picture that Sonam Sangpo, our Bhutanese tour guide, thought he'd seen on someone's shrine in eastern Tibet. And of course we look nothing alike, but